I was going to mention this to you, you know, and you say that, you know, because I was there too. I mean, I considered myself a progressive Mormon. I was there. You know, the worst thing that ever happened to me, I think, was becoming a scholar. I was one. It didn't Packer say scholars and somebody else would have bane of the church's existence. Well, I think he was right, at least in terms of the scholarship piece. But I think as I journeyed through, you know, my blackness and trying to understand what it means to be black from my experience, you know, I lost the compatibility with the church in terms of you know, feeling like this church is I'm already marginalized. Why do I want to go to my church and get marginalized? I don't want to do that. But I'm happy for those who are in the fight, because I've met a lot of young people, like my folks who are older than I am now. It's interesting to look back and see these younger folks where I was, you know, 20 years ago. And then you want to tell them, tell them this is what, you know, give them, but they have to learn that journey on their own. You know, they have to learn on their own. But I want to be there to help guide them if they need help. I don't want to alienate them and turn them away, but I want to guide them and give them some maybe some mentorship. I am writing a piece right now. I'm excited about it. This is for the 40th anniversary. I was invited to do this for dialogue. I'm going to look at the different ways that Blacks deal with stress, the stresses of having to conform to people who want to touch your hair, or the stresses of people making remarks about your skin tone, or stupid stuff like that. And I want to say this, you guys, and I'm going to give these white folks the benefit of the doubt. I think they're well-intentioned. They're just ignorant. And when you hear it over and over again, it starts to cut at you a little bit. So I want to talk about what Black people do in response to those kinds of moments. And some of it is very interesting. So that should be dropping here soon. So I hope
all right. We'll keep our ear open for that.
Please
That's
do.
Very interesting. That's very
Can I ask you guys a question?
Sure.
How did you feel about the pageantry, who's the guy who came out singing kind of African? Alex
Boyer.
Whenever they bring Alex Boyer out to sing kind of African music, how does that make you feel? How does that make you, each one? So Julienna, you first.
All right. So I think from an artistic point, I think it's very refreshing for the church to have things like that happening among themselves. Like, just from an artistic point, he's also done, you know, at a different level what Gladys Knight has done, I think, at a bigger level, because she speaks and whatnot, but just infusing some of that, you know, other culture needs to be seen and heard and whatnot. But I mean, as far as the presentation, of course, there were beautiful people. Of course, it was emotionally touching, and I was teary-eyed watching those beautiful people on stage. But it reminded me of when I served on Temple Square. So I was a missionary on Temple Square, and Europeans would come to Temple Square, and they're not very religious. Like, you know, they're interested. They're very, they look around and they want to know, they want the knowledge. But they're like, this is like Christian Walt Disney, right? Like, you have to try to make a scry at every corner. What's going on with that, you know? And that's a different perspective. And again, to come back to your first question, like, you know, as an inactive member of the church who's been in the church my whole life still, because it's very recent that I left, why do I feel like I can say something? Well, I think it's important to look at how people see you. Because when you're inside, you see a certain way and you block yourself, like, right? Because you get so easily offended if people don't see like you. I hope that not just, you know, progressive Mormon will listen to this, but if any, you know, active member listen to this, I just want to say it's important.
Julienna, you broke up. Can you repeat that? You said it's important. What? It's important
to try to understand how other people see you and from the outside, and not to pull you out or whatever, but like, don't be so close to, you know, if it doesn't come from, you know, don't listen to it, because it's going to be wrong. Like, I feel like I can see, I still speak fluent Mormon. I still know the language very well, but I also see from the outside, and you know.
The reason I'm asking is because when some of the songs are being sung from Africa, it reminds me, it confuses me, because it reminds me of Lion King, and it reminds me of the Book of Mormon musical, where they make fun of the
I
Lion
knew
King.
somebody was going to say that.
Yeah, but it was obvious. It was obvious.
So Darren, what about you? When you see Alex Boyer singing African music with his face painted, go ahead and speak because people couldn't see you.
I just wasn't feeling that. That particular
Why not?
part of it.
Why not?
I wasn't feeling the narrative. This narrative that these people, found the gospel, and it's the same narrative every freaking time. Every time they have one of these things, that's the same.
What's wrong with that narrative? What's wrong with the narrative?
The narrative is that Africans found the church because of a letter that was sent by somebody over in one of the tribes there to bring Book of Mormons and blah blah blah. So you get that one narrative. Then you got two main ones: the Jane Manning James story, how she wanted to have she wanted her blessing that bad and all that. So she died when she's 95, 94, whatever. Then you get the other one by Elijah Abel. Those are the three black people they hold up. That's it. I get so sick. Then the other stuff is African, and then you got a couple of confused people of color in there, and they're
confused.
They're in transition.
Darren, you're being mean.
No, I'm not trying to be mean.
So tell us what's wrong. Darren, tell us what's wrong with the re-emergence of the continual reappearance of Elijah Abel, Jane Manning James, Alex Boyer singing, Lion King-like songs. What's wrong with that from your perspective?
Because there's
I think it exoticizes black people. I think it minimizes the pain that black people are suffering. I don't think there's enough dialogue and discussion about that. There's too much food, fun, and festivities. And that's generally what the church does when it's trying to highlight these sensitive issues. It's let's sing, let's dance, let's have some food, and so, but let's not really talk about the issues, right? And so basically, make me comfortable. Again, we're back to whiteness. Make me comfortable. We're going to do this on my terms if we're going to do it.
Well, and here is, getting to that now, as far as Boyer, I'm going to say this, that Boyer also does that same thing when he was on America's Got Talent. So that is his normal thing, is to bring in his African influences. I'm not going to fault the brother for that. With regard to the and Manning story, and those being the two Mormons to hold up as sort of, in the Mormon, I guess it would be in the Black Mormon Trinity. Right, and the thing about those two wonderful brothers and sisters is that that's one way to handle the church's racism. I want to see the third brother. I want to see the Darron Smith version, where you say, I'm gonna go get my black. Right, I want to see Martin, but I want to see Malcolm too. All right, and their stories are so.
But you got that though. You got that in with they always show Darius Gray.
Right.
Darius Gray is always he's somewhere in the mix.
Well,
the same people all the time.
No, is he Malcolm in that story? But he's not Malcolm in that story, is he?
I mean, he's a storyteller. He's narrating his experience before the 1978 revelation.
Right. But I want to see the brother who says, you know what? I wouldn't join this damn racist church until they changed 78. Right, that's what I'm talking about. Right, I want to see the brother who because those, like I said, are wonderful, faithful stories. But like Manning's story, I got to tell you, it to me, it's always depressing. I'm never inspired by the woman who spent her whole life going for a dream that they never gave her. Well, you can't make that. How do Disney people, as Mormons, come up with that? Don't think about this. The Mormon Disney crowd would only sell that story to us as black people, because they damn sure wouldn't allow that story for them.
Yeah, I mean, hey, Sean, to me, when I hear somebody say she asked dude 4 or 5 times, can he go to the temple before she died, I'd have left the damn church. I'd be like, man, I'm out.
Right.
I'm not gonna spend my time. I'm not gonna cast my pearls before swine. These folks are not interested in me. They don't want me in their presence, and so I'm gonna go find me a community where I can at least, have some semblance of freedom, right? And at least have people treat me like I'm a damn human being.
Yeah, and so that's part of it. Now I gotta tell you, the one thing I feel positive about.
Sean, really quick, before we jump on from Jane Manning James, there's a quote that I heard today that's attributed to her, where she's like going her whole life not being accepted in the temple. She wants her temple blessing. She's worried about being sealed. And she basically says towards the end of her life in frustration, I'm white, with the exception of the color of my skin. And she's basically trying to say, come on, people, I'm doing all I can to be white. Why won't you let me in? I'm just thinking.
See, John, that's problematic.
I know.
And that's what I was trying to say.
That's horrible.
That
I've never heard that.
Black people, we want to be like white people so bad. Some of us do, right? That we'll do anything to be like black people, right? And like white folks. And that has pathological, issues for us down the road when we try to act like and be like white people on their terms. You're never going to be white, right? And you're never going to be accepted by white people. I don't care who you look like, what you sound like, whatever, where you went to school.
I have a hard time with that concept, maybe because I'm not African American, but like
precisely.
I have a hard time with even understanding what that means.
Precisely.
Precisely. Well, with what, Juliana? With what? Understanding what means?
I just don't understand what that means.
Which one? Which thing?
She grew up in
trying to be white.
Background?
What does that mean? Trying to be white, like trying to not be like a person from the ghetto, trying to not be like someone from a trailer. Because I don't know what that means, because there is good and bad in. Give me someone from a ghetto, give me someone from a trailer park that's white or black. I don't want to be like any of them. So what does that mean, trying to be white?
Well, these. Okay, first of all, in all fairness, Juliana, there are two different cultural perspectives we're bringing into this discussion, right? And what the audience is seeing in us is different iterations of blackness, right? So what you and me and Sean all share in common is we're oppressed peoples, right? Whether we believe it or not, we're oppressed people. We're oppressed peoples, marginalized peoples. Now, if you grew up in an island nation where all you saw were your presidents were black and your important people were black.
If you had, he said,
if you have. If you've grown up in an island nation or a nation where you've seen black people who've risen to high levels of status and so on, and you come over here, you're going to see it differently. You're going to see, why are all these black people complaining? They got it great over here. If they just work hard enough, look at all this opportunity.
Yes, well, not like that. I don't think like that, but it's true that when I had to better understand the concept of course you're a minority, but if you had grown up where I grew up in Belgium, like where there's hardly no black people, like when I came here, I landed in DC and I'm like, am I in Africa? Because I had never seen so many black people around. But again, it's I can't compare. It's a different culture, story, because at the same time I was just about always the only black person in my environment in Belgium, but we also never talk about color over there. It's just not a non-topic, right? Like hair color, skin color, eye color, same thing. Like it's just not so it's a very American thing. And that's why when I get a little uncomfortable sometimes when I hear that, they're trying to be white. I'm like, what does that mean? Like, you are.
The Belgians. The Belgians can't escape their racial past either with King Leopold.
Oh yes, but
they certainly can't escape their racist past.
Absolutely, it's awful in the Congo what happened there. It's absolutely terrible. I think it's beyond, or you can't compare to evil, but the scope of it is much larger than what happened in slavery. The scope of it is way larger.
I try to tell people this because they often say, well, why these Africans don't understand? Yeah, they don't understand African American.
It's a different. We have different stories to tell, and I respect your story. I am actually from, my ancestry is from the Congo, and I'm pissed at. I'm pissed at Belgium for not even. I learned, the depth of the story as an adult when I read King Leopold. And because none of that was taught in my schools, I never learned about that. They kept it well, packaged. And I went to all these museums and beauty and royalty things in Belgium that were built on the death of, my people, and I'm really upset about that. And people are, talking about it and trying to do things, but it is what it is. But yes, again, unfortunately, John, it is the white man who went and raped, the black continent. But but it's a different story. But as far as
don't you find it interesting that story I didn't mean to cut you off, but I want to say this before I forget. Don't you find it interesting that story of race is so salient here, in comparison to Belgium or some of the other places where you've been in Europe, where maybe race might be a conversation, but it's certainly not a fixation the way that it's been over here in this country.
I believe it's there? Yes, but it's still, I believe it's newer, right? It's America is newer compared to Europe, right? It's a newer land. And you have people alive who testify of the hurt and the pain, and you have people that are living, as you know, with Africa, it happens in the 1800s, but then the people stay there. There is a few here. They didn't import them. They just went there and raised them there on their own land for the most part. The ones who came afterwards is due to, they commingle. There's still a lot of white people in the Congo, and they live there, and, they're trying the best they can to, they're always nice. Like the Belgians are always nice to the Congolese because they know what they've done,
Yeah.
There's this weird relation, kind of like India and England. They have that kind of.
Yeah.
But here it's, the tension is, we cannot say that there hasn't been progress in the U.S., right? You've had a Black president that shows that,
Well, don't get me started on that, Julianna.
Okay, let me.
But it's not.
Remember, I'm a social scientist, so I want to see the data. I want to see the data.
Let me just because I want to make sure this is great. Let me ask you guys a question about something that. So, Darren, you mentioned Elijah Abel, Jane Manning James. You mentioned Darius Gray. There was the story about Nigeria, Ghana, Jamaica, Brazil. And this is something that I noticed. Why were those stories picked by the script writers for the BeOne celebration? It wasn't because they were courageous necessarily. It wasn't because they followed their conscience. It wasn't because they spoke up and disagreed with things that they didn't like. The reason why all those stories were chosen as a part of the narration is because they remained faithful and obedient, even in face of all that adversity. Did you guys notice that? Did you notice that, and how did you feel about that? Sean,
you're absolutely right. That was a salient point. That is always. When have you ever seen a conference story that didn't deal with exactly that issue? That is always the point of every conference story is at the end, pray, pay, and obey, right? The end of every conference story is that this person stayed loyal, and this, and this is the so I'm not surprised about that. I do want to say, as far as in telling the story, one thing I found interesting is they kind of Hamilton the first vision. And what I mean by that is they told the Joseph Smith story, but they used African Americans to actually tell the story. So sort of like what Hamilton does, right, where you have Black people being George Washington. And I thought that was actually possibly a positive development. Here's why I say that, is that I think one of the challenges the church has with breaking white supremacy is white Jesus. The white Jesus on the wall that we know could not have looked like the Jesus is such I think emblematic portrait of the church. The fact that a church that, like I said, in the 21st century knows Jesus couldn't look like that, but still puts that Scandinavian Jesus on the wall to placate its members. And I've talked to members about this who are absolutely convinced that Jesus was blonde, blue-eyed, and threw for BYU. Through 400. Absolutely convinced. This is some white boy. And I think, the nice thing about seeing African Americans playing parts other than traditionally ascribed to us is that maybe that can start to move into the larger functioning. But as far as the obedience, John, every church story is always going to be about obedience. You know that.
Darren.
The obedience comes at a huge price to people's emotional mental health. So you can celebrate that and say, wow, this person really has long suffering.
Darius, Jane Manning,
wow,
right?
This person's a fool. This person's suffering from racial battle fatigue. So, having to deal with white folks all these years to be told no, 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 no. And what no, 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 no means you're a second-class citizen. You're a second-class citizen. And so I just think that at least to each his own. If you want to be a and we don't often know how we respond to it, but I see it often. I see it a lot more in the church. we've got a lot of confused people of color, you know, and I want to, Julian, I mean that in a not in a pejorative way. I'm just saying that they're trying to figure out where they fit in the church racially. Where do I fit in? We say that all are likened to God, yet I keep hearing lessons about how my ancestors were cursed by God, or they couldn't, you know, they had to make a choice in the pre-existence. I mean, where do those black people, these progressives that you talk about, that I was, find a place and a voice where we can have those dialogues without feeling like we're being disloyal to the organization, or feeling like the organization don't sweep in, and throw us up the shackles and throw us out. I mean, how do you get to that place? For me, I couldn't find a voice. I couldn't find a community. I tried to find the so-called Mormons for social justice, and that was a disaster. That group is not about social justice. It's about social justice for white people. So you have to put the white people part in it, because that's what you're talking about. And the church was never meant for black people to begin with. So we have to reconcile that difference. The church was never meant, as it was conceived in its earlier recollections and earlier formulations by the men who created it. Black people weren't a part of that discussion.
So Darren, so I hear what you're saying, and your experience is yours, and I respect it. Like, I cannot say for myself that I left the church because I felt racism, and I know I've gotten a lot of, you know, heat because of that. But that wasn't my experience and my story.
So are you saying? So if you don't mind me asking you,
sure.
So are you saying you haven't experienced interpersonal racism, where you felt where someone has called you out your name, or you've had personal strife with members of the church or members of your ward at that level? Are you talking about it from that level and then a personal level?
Yeah, on a personal level. I mean, okay. I've heard stories of people who have, and I don't disbelieve it. It's just not my personal story.
Sure, and you know what, Julianne, your stories are valid. So I'm not gonna denigrate your story.
And it doesn't mean yours is not true or my.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Sure. It's just that the reason why I got too uncomfortable is because it's a bit what you're trying to explain, except it's not a color thing. It's where do I fit in, because I don't think like this anymore, and I feel like I'm in a box, and I cannot be myself because I don't, you know. I can't disagree with the leadership, and that's to me that's just not acceptable. Like, you know, I have to be me. I have to be myself, and I have to follow my conscience. You know,
America is a racial oligarchy. So whether we think that race is not a central component of our daily interaction, it is. Whether we think it is or not, it is. It's happening at a subconscious level much of the time. It's dictating the kind of jobs you get. It's dictating the kinds of experiences and opportunities that you have, whether you agree with it or not. There's too much damn data on it. First and foremost,
I'm not trying to disagree with you there, and I think because of where I maybe grew up, how I was raised, my experience in this world, I don't think that way. Like I don't walk that way every day, because that's just not what was my surrounding. And I'm not saying, you know, I'm in denial or anything like that. I just don't walk my life, you know, thinking, you know, who's out to get me, or did he say this that to me? Because, and sometimes it's blatant, right? Someone may ask me my hair or this or that, but I've learned to just answer, or
you find ways to cope, though, right? Julianne, you run a lot.
But I don't
you run a lot?
I don't know that it's coping, because it doesn't hurt me inside.
Aren't you a runner? Aren't you a runner?
I do run.
Okay. So you find ways to. So we're talking about. Listen, you're talking to a sociologist. So okay. I'm going to tell you, interpersonal racism is only one very small part of an enormous problem in this country. So if you feel that the point that you experience here, really, you don't really experience racism much from an interpersonal standpoint, you have no idea how racism is impacting you structurally. You have no idea how it's impacting you, your family,
but I didn't grow
children.
up here. I've been heard living here because it's every day, right? But if I don't live in America, I don't even have to think about it. I don't have to talk to my kids about it. I don't have, this is very, very American, I must say.
Right.
Very American, and it's painful. It's painful because I think it would be good and healthy for people to get past, to fix whatever is there to fix, recognize the pain, everyone, learn new ways of being with each other so that you can move on and be in harmony. Just like when I was in Singapore, and the Muslim and the Hindus and the Buddhists and whatever color, they just live in harmony, and they don't talk about it. They don't just fight or whatever. Like, the tension is just non-existent, because it's like, you know what, we are on the same land and we're just going to live together and respect each other. And it's just not a subject of conversation. That's what I'm trying to say. But again, it's due to a different history, a different culture. So to the fact that I'm not oblivious, and I hear the news and I see what's going on, and I get involved where I can, but I cannot appropriate, a history that's not mine also.
Sean, really quick, let's get Sean in. Sean.
Yeah, I want to jump in here because Julienna is describing something that I think is, it kind of shows, the difference in Africa and people of color in the church, particularly those of us, of African descent. Here's why: is because Julienna's experience is much closer to mine. Darren's experience is maybe a little different in the church a little earlier than I did. But here's what I mean by this: I was treated wonderfully in my church. I was treated in my ward. I was treated in my ward in the Mormon church way nicer than I would ever be treated in my church, because I was a local celebrity. Everyone in the state knew who we were. We were asked to speak at the first state conference. They allowed me, when I went to BYU, to be in the president's suite, to get to meet the apostles. I was the Black Harvard guy. They got a Black Harvard guy. I was treated wonderfully, and individually, people were very kind to me. But the problem is, I could see the supremacy coming in, even affecting my children. So, I'll give you an example. Is this was never taught to my son, but my then 8-year-old son asked me at one point, "Daddy, when do I get to be white?"
Oh wow, that's.
I never taught my son, "You're going to get to be white." I think he kicked out.
Horrible.
If I were ever to be a righteous man to be on that stage, I would need to be white. If I were ever wonderful, I got to tell you that one time my son got mad at me and said, I want a white daddy.
Wow, that's terrible.
I'm on ChristianMingle.com and get a white man. And here's why. I understood it. He made perfect sense. Let me explain. The white men in our church were very good to him. As anyone, the Scouts leaders, etc. As his father, my job is to be so wonderful to him. My job is to be his father and not his friend. So his association was, every white man I know is wonderful. And this one guy tends to sometimes yell at me about things, right?
Yeah.
It those types of perceptions. Like I said, this isn't people being mean. It's the structure of the church creates it so that white men always turn out to be these wonderful, wonderful paragons of virtue. By the way, this is a little postscript to the white daddy story, is that my son later that evening sends me a text and says, Daddy, I want you to bring me some juice. And I texted him back saying, get your own damn juice, and signed it back then. Because black, and even now I'll tease him about being. But the truth of the matter is, I think these little things are not the result of anarchy. It's not the result of people being mean to us. It's not being overly kind to try to include us, but it just creates these weird, scenarios of like we said, Darren used the term, it offends people, but and white supremacy is not a meanness. It's not people being mad at someone. It's simply an idea that the highest glory to be attained in the world is to be a white man.
But this is why I think, this is why I said at the very beginning, don't just have a celebration, but put more people of color in your leadership so people can relate to them and people can have role models and people to look up to that look like them. And put some Asians, put some, Indian descent, put colorful, like more color.
So let's do this, guys. let's do this. I don't want to cut this off. I want to go on forever, but we've gone way longer than we were supposed to. We're supposed to only be at an hour. I think we're at almost 2.
I probably want to go bring up part 1, part 2. This was really interesting conversation we've had. I think it really shows the differences between how we see. And the reason why Julienna, your story is really fascinating because it really speaks to, I've done one of the areas I look at is an area called neurosociology. So one of those areas is that women who come here from Africa, Nigeria, and women who come here from Jamaica, it takes them, when they first get here, they're having the same, within their childbearing years, they're having the same mortality and infant mortality rates as white women, right? They're having the same child production. After about 10 years of being here, that productivity drops precipitously. It goes from, the normal fertility that white women carry to boom, down to where African American women are having, high levels of infant mortality. This has been a wonderful study that was done by a guy named David Williams. And David Williams' conclusion is that what is causing these differences? These women are from Africa or from the Caribbean islands. They've had no experience with the kinds of racism that African American women have had. And yet by one generation, and they're already having high levels of infant mortality. So that has something to do with the degree to which racism is impacting the life experiences of people who are not from here, but they're not smart enough or they've not been trained to know that it's about race. This is about race.
So are you saying I'm not smart enough?
No. Because you are. You just told me. You told me you understood that race has a lot to do with this. But a lot of people don't. They just say, well, it's just luck. It's serendipity. God, I'm not praying hard enough. If I work hard enough, then I can get that. It's just the data just doesn't support it. It just doesn't support it.
That's interesting.
Sadly.
Yeah. John, what's the last
let me add, no, I love it. I really would want this conversation to go on forever. But we do need to end it today, but we can have you guys back and just keep going at this. Just today, I've got to run, honestly. So I apologize for that. But let me give everyone one last word just to bring it back. So the church has given the priesthood to Black men. They have let Black women and families now enter the temple. They're now spreading the gospel, spreading like wildfire in Africa. There are hundreds of thousands of African members. The church has now brought on, what's that?
No African Americans though.
No, I know. Let me just say what they have done. They do try and have, members of the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. They try and have area authorities who are from Africa or from Brazil. They finally have a Brazilian, apostle, which is progress. And they're basically saying race. They're saying racism is bad, discrimination.
He is, John.
No, I know.
Just because you put a person of color in a position doesn't mean that they're going to act and walk and talk. They have the same ideas.
So that's my final question for everyone. For today's episode, we've had the 40-year celebration. They're denouncing racism. They're denouncing prejudice. They're saying that we all need to do better. What progress can you acknowledge, each of you, and then what needs to still happen for the church to kind of be right with the world and with you guys? So let's do Sean first.
Can't help but acknowledge progress, I guess. The only thing I would say as far as, going forward, because this is, by the way, not just a Mormon problem, but an American problem particularly, and probably a worldwide problem, is the fact that, I think we're going to have to really try to work harder. Darren talked about this. It's not enough just to say, okay, I don't hate, Black people. You actually have to work hard to dismantle an entire lifetime of learning that white is supreme. And you don't just do that by saying, okay, I'm not going to say that anymore. It actually takes concerted effort. And so, like I said, I mentioned a simple thing. Jesus needs to be brown. We don't have to go black. That's crazy, all right? But we can go at least a lighter, make him the color of our new apostle from Brazil. All right, give me Steph Curry, maybe Steph Curry. All right, we have to go. We can't go, Wesley Snipes and Bernie Mac. That's crazy. But we have to move images, or make a concerted effort to get rid of all vestiges of the fact that of white supremacy, because otherwise we're not getting any further.
Okay, that's great, Sean. Darren, how about you? What do you acknowledge in terms of progress? What needs to still happen?
The only evidence of progress I've seen is there seems to be more second generation Mormons that I'm seeing now that I haven't seen before. So I'm seeing a lot more growth that way, but that's only in the United States, not too much abroad. That's the first thing. The second thing is just simply apologize. Just simply say, I'm sorry. I mean, damn, it ain't that hard. I'm sorry, we made a mistake, it's over, move on. Then people can say, wow, they really took responsibility and ownership for their shit. And then move on. Right? I mean, you'd have people flocking to the church, black folks at least anyway. Really, the Mormon church did that? Wow. But no. We're talking about this, down the road, 50 years down the road. It'll be the 50th anniversary. Y'all still be talking about, I'll be too old. Don't call me because I ain't going to say shit about it. Y'all talk the same stuff y'all been saying all the same time about. Well, what's going to happen in the 60th year? They're not going to say an apology. They're not going to apologize. Period.
All right, then you're going to have to live with that.
Yep.
Let it go.
I do.
Let it go.
I do live with it. I'm okay with it. Because you know why I'm okay with it, Julienna? Because I was never meant to be a part of it anyway.
There you go.
All right, Julienna.
Well, what I would like to say is, first of all, I want to say to people like Alex Boyer and Gladys Nice to keep pushing those boundaries by, encouraging people to be themselves and bring their culture in, and not just them, but
Sisters in Zion,
Sisters in Zion, Native Americans, any cultures, Polynesian,
Rice Gray,
whatever your culture is, just don't let it go. And people around you need to accept who you are and where you're from, how you're coming. I want to encourage the people who are inside of the church, which are many, who are struggling, to continue to push those boundaries and make those demands, because I admire them for having that energy, because I'm like, I lost the interest, but just keep pushing those boundaries. The church does move, very slowly, but it does make changes, and people need to fight from the inside, or stand up for the oppressed, whatever the group may be, who you are. And also have the courage, if it's too uncomfortable, to admit that to yourself, and be true to yourself. And if the answer is, I can't live here, I can't do this anymore because I can't live in a box, reach out to people like, who've done it, because it's very scary. I don't want to encourage people to leave, but I want to encourage people to take care of their mental health and their physical health. And if it's detrimental and they're suffering, you don't have to live with that. You don't have to live with that.
They need to leave.
You really don't. The world is big and beautiful.
If they're suffering to that extent, they need to leave.
Just, reach out. And there are many groups at different levels of believe, non-believe, in, out. Reach out to people who've gone through the journey and get that help and support. So wherever you're at.
The church is a stressor, a psychological stressor, in a number of ways. John is a clinical psychologist, and he can tell you, just working with Mormons, that there's a number of stressors that Mormons deal with. And being a member of an LGBT community is hugely stressful in a church that propagates the idea that the nuclear family is the end and be all of family. That's hugely stressful. Obviously, blacks. So one way that you can alleviate interpersonal suffering is bounce. It's so liberating.
Sean.
Not everyone's ready, but yeah.
Just
Sean.
I want to.
But I get divorced if I don't bring this up. My wife had mentioned this to me, and I can't afford a divorce. All right, so hear me out. All right, nor do I want one. But there was a little consternation among some of my sisters in the church that this weekend there were a lot of events for BeOne, not more than just an hour and a half celebration, and that a lot of our progressive Mormon brothers and sisters, white Mormon brothers and sisters, particularly sisters, weren't there. I, for a couple of years, was on the OW board. Chris Roberts has been the president or chair of that board. And there's a little consternation that maybe some of our white sisters could have taken, one or two floats off and come to see the event, or to otherwise, be involved. That maybe we're not getting equal intersectionality between the two. So I had to bring that up to make sure that my white sisters know you need to do a little better.
Yeah. May I ask one more? When I say one more thing too, it's very hard being a black male in the church. Black men in the church are often beat up real bad by black women in the church. So let's not get started with that either. That's a whole nother issue. But I find that black women in the church can be very hostile to black men.
Darren, how divorced you trying to get? Brother? All right, come on, man, come on.
All right. Well, you are a brilliant and a wise panel. It's been so wonderful having you. Thank you so much, all of you, for being willing to come on. We didn't get a lot of listener comments or questions because there was so much to be said, but we want to thank everyone for the conversation. And we want to, let's have more of this. Is that okay? Let's do more of this.
Yeah.
Sean's saying no.
Your listeners can't answer. They don't have any concept to answer us questions about this. They don't live it. All they can do is listen and try to be transformed.
What I can say is a lot of people are grateful. Rachel says, fascinating conversation. Thanks, everyone. Melissa says, enjoying this podcast very, very much. Melissa gave you guys 2 varies. Joanna says, this is a great discussion. Daniel says, that's a fascinating and terrifying study, Darren. He's talking about the study you're telling us about. Anyway, our listeners love this conversation. I love this conversation. I can't thank you guys enough for doing it. Kudos to whatever progress has been made, and let's hope the church keeps making more and more progress. Let's see some apologies. Let's see more leaders of color, and we'll see where we go.
Alrighty. Thank you.
Love you guys. Thanks for joining us. Thanks all the listeners, and check us out on mormonstories.org. Email us at mormonstories@gmail.com if you have feedback for us. And we'll talk again soon. Take care, everybody.
Alrighty. Bye, John. Bye,
Sean.
Bye, Darren.
Sean.
All right, I will. See you guys.
Bye.